The 2024 expansion draft has come and gone, and the New York Liberty lose Kayla Thornton. Tough loss. We heard from the social media streets that Ruby is not going to be happy, among some other people. So we thought this would be the perfect episode to recap Kayla Thornton's years with the Liberty. We're also going to talk about some news in women's basketball, including, did the Valkyries just shade Seattle? All that and more on today's episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Gotta get up, gotta get up, gotta get up. Hey, women's basketball fans, welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala. All right, women's basketball fans, welcome to another episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media. My name is Erica L. Ayala, also known as the head Black Rosie in charge. I'm joined by Brian Florenton. Looks like you're sporting a fresh cut. I didn't get to that while we were off camera, fam, but how you living?
Yeah, I had a family event this week, and I was like, there might have been a potential for pictures to be taken, and I was like, I'll save the fro building adventure for the real winter months.
Fair enough. Well, always good to be on the podcast with you. Both of us in New York at the moment, or in the tri-state area. I am actually just wrapped up a hockey game here at the old stomping ground of the New York Liberty, Madison Square Garden. I got to see if Maddie is woofing around or something. Oh man. But we had the expansion draft, Brian, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, I'm double dipping today, but I was double dipping also on Friday for the expansion draft, so I didn't get to see the full production. I caught the cliff notes, if you will, afterward. But you were able to tap in. Just overall, what was your takeaways from the production? And we'll get into the picks from Golden State in just a minute.
Yeah, I like the live nature of being in San Francisco for the draft. I can't remember the last time I've even thought about an expansion draft. So I was like, oh hey, yeah, you have the new fans there, nice atmosphere. I love the purple. I'm a sucker for the purple lighting. It's very it fits my motif, if you will. So I like that. I like that we got to hear from new head coach Natalie Nakase during as well. Like she was able to sort of give a sort of like a Cliff Notes version of what she's looking for in a roster. And that
Mhm.
kind of played out in some of the selections we saw. And we were talking about it beforehand. It was only 30 minutes, and I'm sort of like split between, hey, maybe this could have been a little bit longer, or hey, we're just reading names off a sheet. 30 minutes is nice and solid. We got analysis in between. We need to be more economical with our time instead of like staring at the television all day. So or our phone, since I was on the train while this was happening. So it's kind of like I was kind of sort of back and forth with it, but altogether good.
Okay.
Thumbs up. We'll do it again next year.
Well, yes, we will. Which, we'll talk a little bit, as I mentioned, about news around women's basketball. But Toronto, baby, with Golden State doing what they doing, I'm just curious. I have some questions for you, but we're gonna get to that a little bit later. It's all about Golden State, and at least, from the Liberty side of things, we'll talk about the Seattle side of things in more detail, and then, of course, give the full picks in just a minute. But Kayla Thornton, now we talked about this on the podcast, Brian. We are not surprised here on Gotta Get Up that Kayla Thornton went unprotected. We still want to see the full list. You cowards, show us the list. But no, jokes aside, not surprised that she was unprotected. And at least for me, I am not surprised that of the players that we think were unprotected, that Kayla Thornton fits into, as you mentioned, what Natalie is looking for her first few roster players for Golden State.
Yeah, it's sort of like it was sort of like a double dip in a sense because KT fits what Natalie Nakase is looking for, and also the GM over there was someone who helped bring Kayla to New York in the first
That
place.
part, that
So
part, exactly.
it's like, oh, who knows you better than the person who helped bring you to New York in a mega
Exactly.
trade 2 winters ago? So it's sort of like fit all the stars sort of lined up in that regard. And I think for what Ohema and Natalie are trying to do in Golden State, you're starting to see the vision come together a little bit. And I think as we draw closer to the draft, where they'll have the fifth pick, free agency, where they'll be able to make things shake and sort of see if they can bring players in, they have a really interesting opportunity to be a good first year expansion team because in
Mhm.
basketball it's pretty rare. But I feel like Erica, you would know better than me in hockey. Expansion teams tend to like start off on the good foot, right?
Oh man, that's funny that you put that on me because yes, I'm here. I cover an expansion team, the most recent expansion team in the National Hockey League. And see, I'm curious. I love that you actually mentioned this, and we'll probably break this down in more detail. But just for those not so NHL minded folks, so the Seattle Kraken were the second expansion team in, I want to say, like it's not exactly 7 years, but within a 7 year span. And the reason that that was um, something that impacted the Kraken is because GMs got hip to how things went down when the Vegas Golden Knights went through the expansion draft. So, we'll get into if there were trades or not and all of that stuff. Nah, there were none. There are none. So there we go. We covered that. But that was something that Vegas was able to make a little bit of a different splash than the Seattle Kraken. So I can just say from my perspective, the Seattle Kraken expansion team, not great. That first season, a lot of those pieces went on to lead to a pipeline. But here's the thing. Again, that's why I love that you actually brought up this question because it allows us to talk about so many different things. There is no pipeline. You if you're taking them in any expansion draft, they're going to play for your team in the spring. And I think that's a difference and it came through in some of what the Valkyries were saying, Brian, about their picks, that as long as it's a green light on the side of the players and their team agents and whatnot, medical health, physical, all of that stuff is good to go, then the expectation is these players are going to play. That's not exactly what you see in the NHL and arguably in some other leagues.
Yeah, feels like because I think especially with the immediacy of WNBA roster spots, you
Yep.
can't. But like if you can avoid it, you don't want to like burn a pick on an American player because American players are here, and then if they
Mm,
don't play, they're off elsewhere. Whereas if you have more international players, that might buy you time. Like you might be able to sort of like finagle a few things here or there. Like in New York, for example, when they traded last year in the Big 14 trade, Leo didn't come in 2023, but she came in
right.
2024 and she was
Right.
ready to roll. But it's the context is so dependent on the circumstance too.
Yeah, well, and also you're talking about in hockey, they say entry draft. That's like the draft for rookies. And so a little bit of what you're talking about is what happens at the entry draft in the spring. But the expansion draft, again, these are players who are coming from other teams because the overall thought of an expansion draft is, well, let's give you, because we want to at least give you a fighting chance, it's only fair to start with players that have WNBA experience. And, I see Damien's comment here, shocked that Kayla Thornton got picked up by Golden State. I mean, I think you and I, Brian, kind of hit on it. I'm not shocked at all. That's from, I
Yeah.
mean, not knowing who the list is, Caleb Thornton, KT's at the top of my list. But I always liked having Thornton for the New York Liberty. And we're going to break down some of her stats because I don't really think, if I'm being honest, that her stats tell the full story, Brian. And so maybe if that's what you're looking at, if you're only looking at a box score, I think you miss a lot of what makes Kayla Thornton special, including in this championship run for the New York Liberty. But we're going to get into that a little bit more in the second quarter. But hey, Ronnie, hey, Damien, thank you so much for popping in. Anyone else, let us know where you're at, who you are, where you're from, what you did. Okay, that's a song. Never mind. We continue on, but I think I think it's going to be interesting to see some of these other picks again, especially thinking about Seattle and the comments that were made about the pick or lack thereof. So for the Golden State Valkyries from Atlanta, they chose Liana Rupert, Chicago Sky, Maria Condi, Connecticut Sun, Veronica Burton Veronica Burton. So it's Carla Lady from Dallas. I think I pronounced that right. Indiana Fever, Temi Fangbenle, the Aces, Kate Martin, who like Kate Martin is like the thumbnail for every story about the Golden State Valkyries, which is so funny to me. From LA, they got Steph Talbot. From Minnesota, Cici Zandalasini. From the New York Liberty, of course, Kayla Thornton. Phoenix, Monique Billings comes over from Phoenix. Seattle Storm, a player called Pass. Are you familiar with that? I couldn't find any information on them on on the website, but you know the website be a little late or early sometimes
Yep.
early to the party. No, jokes aside, we'll get into the Seattle non-pick a little later on the episode. And then from Washington, Julie Van. Now, if you're in the WNBA, she gave us the green light, thumbs up to say Van Loo, but when she plays overseas, it's Van Lo. So, Brian, other than Kayla Thornton and the Seattle situation, again, we'll talk about that later. What stands out to you? Is there, let me ask it this way, is there a pick that you really like? And is there a pick that you really don't like, or you're kind of scratching your head about?
One I really liked was grabbing Julie Van Loo from Washington. Like
Mhm.
she gave some really good minutes last year, and I think that especially, lead like at as you sort of build out a roster, having a good lead guard goes a long way because it helps keep
Mhm.
everything organized. Van Loo can heat up from deep. It feels like she'd really fit well and she'd have a good starting point with them. So I'm excited for that. I would say there really isn't anything that surprised me as far as who they picked. I was more surprised at who was available. Like, because I think
Mm.
just to sort of like circle to Vegas for a second, like I feel like outside of the core four, like I wasn't quite sure who else would be protected because I was thinking about it and AC and Tip would, in theory, be protected, but at the same time, if they were available, they're high retirement risks, both for different reasons. So
Mhm.
if they were available, would you even want to go that route? So that leaves something to be desired. For Connecticut, I was surprised VB was open, but then you look at that guard room and it's like, would you leave a Ty Harris out there? I don't think I would because I feel like Ty gives them a little bit more juice as for what they need. Maybe I don't think would be available, and anybody else I don't think would be accessible for the Sun. So tough sledding there. I
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a part of me. I feel like it might have just been my brain being off, but there was a part of me that thought that the Dream might have left Haley Jones open for some reason. But then I'm like,
I think a lot of people thought that. And
yeah,
again, in fairness, we don't know who was unprotected. All we
that's true.
know, the only players we know for sure were unprotected are the players that were selected from Golden State. So a lot of
Yeah.
people saying, well, oh, they should have done this, they should have done, or Atlanta should have done this, Atlanta should have done that, New York should have done this. New York and Atlanta
Yeah.
might have did exactly what they needed to do. And it
Yeah,
was
but
up
we
to
don't
Golden
know.
State. And again, we'll talk about Seattle later, but just a reminder, because I'm seeing some of the comments and I will circle back to some of them, but a reminder that Golden State is so convicted and they have so much conviction, I should say, in how they want to play that they literally picked no one from the six names available from an entire WNBA team that was a playoff team last year. Okay?
Mhm.
So they listen. I'm going to use this is a hypothetical. Matter of fact, I'm gonna use retired players so nobody gets in their feelings, right?
Hit me.
Let's say you had Tamika Catchings, Maya Moore, Candace Parker, Sue Bird, and Tisha Penetra. I'm just saying Tisha because I saw her last night. Okay. Oh, I need another player. And Lauren Jackson. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are six names. Brian, if you could take all six, would you take all six? Is that even a question? Of course not. I set you up for that. You're taking all six if you can take all six. Now, here comes the question. If you can only take one, who do you take? But the answer is dependent on what you already have. Because, I mean, if I'm the New York Liberty, I'm taking Sue Bird or Tisha. I'm taking it because I'm taking a point guard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's so dependent, and I think that is something that came across very aggressively for, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like Golden State is like, no, 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 no. We're gonna be exactly who we want to be. You think you're gonna be cute, giving us all, the leftovers in your shopping cart, but watch, our holiday meal gonna slap. Like, like that's, I feel like that's how they approached it, and I love that for them. I really do.
Yeah.
It puts some pressure on players, but just to go back to hockey, a big thing in hockey is like the revenge game, because these players are like, oh, so I'm not a part of your future plans. Bet. Wait till we play you. Game circled on the calendar. Wait
Yep.
till we play you, and come find out about me. Come find out about me. And I do think Kayla Thornton can be that kind of player for the New York Liberty. I honestly think Kayla Thornton is a very, just broadly speaking, is the prototypical type of player to unearth and upend what the New York Liberty try to do well.
Yeah, it'll definitely make for it'll definitely make for a fun competitive night. Like I saw someone
Mhm.
post a clip of Brianna Stewart saying that she hated going up against KT. She's like, it's like hell to score on her. So for Stewie, it's oh boy, I thought I had got a vacation from that post 2022. Not
No,
this time,
ma'am.
friend.
No, ma'am. Yep. Now we're on the other side again. And that's real. I mean, of course, it's a part of the game. It's a part of the business. And sometimes players, they like the opportunity. Like there's a player on the crack and he's like, I'm really thankful for my team. He's like, now I get an opportunity to, figure out what kind of player I am on a whole different team. So like this is gonna make my game even better. Like
Yeah.
thank you for not protecting me. I was like, you know what, you better turn that frown upside down, sir. I love that for you.
Yeah, and on the KT tip, I remember in May I was talking to Sandy about KT, and she mentioned that at the end of 2023, Sandy, JK, and the coaching staff encouraged Kayla, hey, when you go overseas, try working on this a little bit more, like try driving to the basket a little bit more. And then
Mhm.
she came back in and applied that in the season. So being on a new team with a new role and a new roster context, I feel like will allow her to sort of tap into different avenues of her game that we may not necessarily see because there are so many top tier options in New York. We'll see how Golden State shapes out. But for a player like her, why
Mhm.
not? Like, this is a new opportunity. You get to sort of like build a foundation, build a championship
Yep.
foundation if everything goes right down the line. That's a super fun thing to be a part of, you know?
Yeah.
It sucks to leave your friends, but I
Mhm.
feel like when your friends care about you and everyone sort of
Yeah.
like has that respect for you, it's okay. I get to try this new adventure. Like
Right.
what I did here is never gonna like I won't have to buy a drink in this town ever again.
Oh
But I'm
no.
gonna try something new.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I don't get the sense that Kayla is leaving on bad terms or
Mhm.
that it's salty, because it does get like that, whether it's through an expansion draft or trades or whatever the case is, waivers. Things can get a little dicey.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be all love. And Kayla Thornton's gonna be Kayla Thornton wherever she plays, and I love her style of play. I've always been a fan of KT. I've always thought she could be really great in New York. Obviously, in the 2 years that she was here, she was a part of two teams that got to the WNBA finals, culminating with a championship this past season. And I do think it's that grit, it's that sandpaper, it's the physicality that she brings to the game. And let's talk about it. So we're going to get into our next segment here. Can the New York Liberty replace Kayla Thornton? Well, I think before we answer that question, Brian, we have to talk about, well, what did Kayla Thornton bring? And kind of alluded to it in the last segment, but we're in the second quarter now. Let's just talk stats and facts, right? So in 2023, Brian, she was averaging 20, or excuse me, 17 uh, minutes per game, 4.5 points per game, 20 minutes per game, 5.5 points per game in 2024. Now, those numbers, they're not like, I mean, if we're being honest, there's not anything extraordinary, right, about that. A career average of 7 points per game, a career high um, of 10 points per game. Now, Kayla Thornton, for the most part, has been a a role player, right? A reserve player. Um, so putting it in that context. So I don't think those numbers pop. But for you, Brian, I'll let you start first. What are some of the intangibles, the things that maybe don't stand out in a box score or in her career log that you thought really made Kayla Thornton a special kind of player for this New York Liberty squad who eventually won a title with her on the roster?
Yeah, I think one of KT's biggest things is that she's a constant ball of energy. Like there'll be games, especially in the early parts of 2023, where it's like it will take the car a little bit of time to start up, and then Kayla comes in, and then everything just sort of picks back up. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially in what's coming up to be a longer season, you're gonna have more nights like that. So having a player off the bench who can sort of like shake things up, get everything going is super valuable. And she bought that a great deal. I think also for KT, what helps is that she was someone that on the bench that Sandy trusted. Like, we talked about it a lot last year in particular, but when it really came down to it, Sandy was like, she looked at that bench and there wasn't really anybody she could turn to besides Kayla. So you
Mm-hmm.
have a situation where your starters are pitching a complete game in the second half of Connecticut in game four, and then in game four in the semis, and then in game four of the finals is, oh, I can only count on Kayla off the bench because no one else has what I need in this moment. So you have a situation where she trusted her a lot. And even this year, amidst the injuries and before the permanent lineup change in the playoffs, Kayla was someone saying to be like, "Oh, okay, you got to go in. I need you. I need you in there. I need you to do
Yep.
this. I need you to do that." And then in game five, like the game, a player like Kayla who can come in and just like wreck shit, for lack of a better term, like you need that. And then in a game where they're not calling anything, and it's I'm gonna let y'all be physical tonight. Okay, Kayla, muscle time. Let's get it.
That's it. That
And
is
then
exactly it. That is exactly what my answer is. But I'm sorry, I interrupted because I was just getting so excited.
nah. Nah, we good. Like having a player who could just like wreck shop in the way that she did. Like the scoring wasn't there, but who cares? Like if we're not scoring, y'all not gonna score either. We'll just keep running up and down, and I'm
Boom.
gonna push you off your spot. I got to guard
Boom.
Elena Deladon. I could do that. Nafisa Collier, she's amazing. I could guard her too.
Exactly. Her versatility. When you look at her height, you don't immediately see that versatility, but when you see her physicality, her physique in action, that's when you're like, okay, this is the trust element. This is the, kind of jack of all trades, can do a little bit of everything for you, a utility type player, especially defensively. But not to be forgotten is that Kayla Thornton is a very efficient shooter for the minutes that she gets, because they're not 20 minutes straight solid. It's a few minutes here, a couple of minutes there. And then depending on whether she's needed, because sometimes, to your point, Brian, I think what we saw with New York is like, Kayla, baby, we know you can shoot the ball. That's not what we need tonight.
Yeah,
I'm gonna need you to get me the ball. Don't shoot the
yeah.
ball, get me the ball. Other
Mhm.
nights it's the opposite. It's like, hey, you know what? Stewie's holding it down, blocking everything. It's a whole block party over here. I don't know what's going on with them legs. 3-pointer ain't working. I'm gonna need you to take that shot, because if you take that shot, I don't even like. Again, this is kind of me reflecting my inner Sandy Brondello. But same thing I said about Sabrina Ionescu. Do you always need Kayla Thornton to make those 3-pointers? No. I'm just gonna be real. You don't need her to make those threes if everything else is working. But when everything else isn't working, but Nigel Hamilton went through some things. Sabrina Ionescu not hitting her shots. Stewie can't hit shots. You can go to Kayla and make sure you get her in rhythm, and she'll do that for you off the bench.
Yeah,
No
like
problem.
there was one game. I want to say it was against Connecticut before the break where she just came in and she had like 7 points in like a quick burst in the second quarter and completely flipped the game. And
That's
a
it.
player
That's
like
it.
Kayla's like, yep, like Kayla cut to the basket,
That's
finish the
it.
traffic, do those
Yep.
things. Like, and I think especially for her, it's that she didn't really need the ball. Like,
Mm-mm.
if it's, I need you to spot up in the corner so that way
Yep.
everyone else has room. And even though teams can be like, "Oh, we'll leave her open," you're a 40% 3-point shooter. If you're open, let it go.
That's
So you
it.
have, yeah, like that fearlessness and that sort of that inner confidence matters a great deal.
That's
And
it.
I think that especially for a player like her, she's almost like a multiplier where when you have like
Mm,
really great players around her, like their skills get amplified
leveled
even
up.
more.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
So if
She like a
yeah.
mushroom from Mario, from Super Mario Brothers. Yeah, so we're talking so many great things about Kayla, and I see Damien is bereft. And I get it, Damien. I get it. I completely understand. And I think your question, let me actually put this back up. Damien saying, Thornton brought energy and effort off the bench, and this will hurt the Liberty in some way, in my opinion. And who is going to replace someone like Kayla Thornton? Well, Damien, I'm so glad you asked, because here's the thing, and I feel like we've been saying this for a while, Brian. I know I've been saying it on CBS Sports. It seems pretty obvious that a team that won a championship the way the New York Liberty won a championship, whoever got picked, unless you could argue they didn't play last season or even 2 seasons ago, Han. But you could argue that it was going to be an impact. This is a by committee team, and it
Yeah.
took the entire committee, including a roster that has never played together before, to win a championship in overtime,
Yup.
in game 5. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was going to hurt either way.
Yeah.
I don't like that Kayla Thornton was left unprotected. I don't like that she was chosen by the Golden State Valkyries as someone who hosts Got to Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. But I respect it from Golden State's perspective, because they've got a real one. They got
Yup.
a real one. So how do you replace? Well, our good friend Amir actually has, and actually, Damien, you've been saying this too for a minute, if memory serves, and as if I recall correctly, Rebecca Gardner, Amir in our Slack channel. If you're not a part of the Slack channel, you should definitely join. Posted a highlights reel, and I'm at the hockey game here at MSG, and I'm watching this because it'd been a minute since I've seen a healthy Rebecca Gardner. But I remember her coming to Chicago. A lot of how the New York Liberty, Brian, have been recruiting is what gave Chicago a player like Gardner, looking at the game overseas, a quote unquote rookie at at an older age than is the average rookie. So we're not talking like some, because people forget, right? Rebecca Gardner was like what, 30 years old and a rookie. So we're not talking about like a 23-year-old rookie in Leo. We're talking 30,
Yeah.
you know. And that's wild. It was a great story. Now, for me, what I like for Rebecca Gardner as a potential quote unquote replacement, although I think it's more, I don't want to say that as holistically, but from a basketball perspective, you
Yeah.
get the shooting, you get someone who can drive. I actually think Gardner probably has a little bit more of a knack for getting downhill and driving effectively and smoothly to, to the basket than Kayla Thornton. Not that she can't do that, but Thornton is like muscle, right? Gardner has some finesse as well. And I think that's the two things that I think are not like for like. Gardner finesse can make a beautiful, spectacular move and finish beautifully at the rim. Kayla Thornton, if she's going to the basket, that ball might not go in, but somebody's going down.
Yeah. Somebody, I hope
Somebody
everyone,
somewhere is
yeah,
going down.
yeah. Like when KT drives, it's like I hope for everyone, like you guys worked on your midsection because somebody's getting an elbow in a spot where it's like, oh,
Oh, you
make
like
sure you
she
guys,
makes you feel
yeah,
it. You do an ice pack. If you've ever seen Kayla Thornton at like a shoot around, or practice, like sis got the whole armor. They have the vest. Not everyone wears the vest with the padding. Kayla Thornton wears the vest with the padding. Some of y'all know. Like if you've been around hoopers, like the little pull, the cutoffs. Like the sweat wick, whatever technology. Hers has padding
yeah.
in,
Like
in
what?
the ribs and in the back. Some people just wear compression sleeves. KT wears them with the padding. She knows somebody somewhere going down. And I
Yeah.
love that about her game. Rebecca Gardner doesn't quite give you that.
One of my favorite sort of like WNBA tweets from a couple years ago was someone asked Skylar Diggins Smith, "Hey, who's the strongest player you had to go against?" She was like, "Man, let me tell you, that KT jacked. Like she beat."
Bong.
She's like her and Jackie Young is like, man, like I
Like,
see her lift weight. She's like, "What?"
that's
I
what I'm
love that
saying.
so much. Yep.
That is, and so I like Gardner. I really do like Gardner. I think there might be some other. I think Leo. We already kind of saw this, but Leonie Phoebish can take some minutes that um, Sandy reserved for KT. I think we
Mhm.
already saw a little bit of that, and I think we'll
Yeah.
see some of that next season as well. But Leo is deceptively strong. I'm not sure about Gardner in that specific capacity, but just the way she moves, like, is she as strong as KT? I don't think many people are. But I think she kind of fits into that Leo category of deceptively strong. But
Yeah.
you do lose muscle and sandpaper. I literally wrote that down. You lose muscle and sandpaper with KT, and I'm not sure that Gardner and Leo or anyone else gives you that. Niara is not a muscle and sandpaper player. She has great size, but she's not gonna, she's not gonna Steph Dolson lay you out with a with a screen. So that's missing for me right now from this Liberty roster, Brian. But what do you think about Gardner? And are there players either that are on or that we're expecting to be on the Liberty roster, or is there maybe somebody else out there? I see in the comments we get another Gabby Williams mention, but what are your thoughts there? Can the New York Liberty replace Kayla Thornton?
I think what'll help with Rebecca Gardner next year is that she's had a year with the team. Like she hasn't played this year because she's recovering from the
Yeah,
Achilles
but
tear.
she was
But
everywhere. Like, she was
yeah,
at the celebration. Like,
yeah,
she's been around the team for
yeah.
sure.
At practices, like
Yep,
yeah, she was like
exactly.
she was there with the team, like from top to bottom. And I think
Hmm.
having that comfort helps make it a lot easier
Yeah,
because it's a you're not jumping into something completely brand new to your mind. It's
right.
okay. I see how Sandy works. I see how everyone is in. I've been in the locker room, so I know the ebbs and flows that come with this team. So I can just slide right in, and I think I'll be able to contribute. And she tore her Achilles, I want to say in February of this year or like March, but by
Hmm.
the time May comes around, it would have been like at least 16 months. And the
Yeah,
further you're away from the Achilles tear, the better your game is. So
yeah,
you have that opportunity to just have like as much time as possible to really continue healing up, continue making things comfortable for yourself. And I think that'll help. On the layoff front, you know, I I thought about it during games 3, 4, and 5 of the finals, but we really started to see Sandy tap into more buttons for Leo. Like Leo was posting up court every time she got it. Like
hmm,
she's making those big baskets. She's doing all these things well. And I think for Leo, like you see why she was a Spanish League MVP. Like you see the excellence in her game. And Leo is someone Leia ain't no punk. So if someone tries it with her, mm-mm,
you're
not
gonna
her.
find out. You're gonna find
Yeah,
out real quick, real quick.
like Leia will be like, I'm like very nice and kind, but if
Yep,
it's
she's
that
not gonna
time,
be loud, but she
yeah,
will be assertive. She will be.
yeah,
It will be final. Like,
yep,
like when when she lays down the rule of law, it is final. No negotiations.
yeah. Like Leia is one who can mix it up, and I think
Hmm.
that and I think especially teams are always gunning for the Liberty because that's just how things are. But
Ugh,
if I feel like if you want to try it this time around, we got something for you
that's it.
if it gets to that.
We got
And I
it.
think
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I think also it's going to be dependent on how things shake out in free agency, but I feel like a player like Kennedy Burke can be a
Hmm.
solid sort of like I guess like a not a placeholder because that feels wrong, but like she can sort of like fill those gaps in to an extent
Yeah,
because KB like she didn't get that many minutes of the year, but when she did play, it was solid.
yeah.
Like
I
she
agree.
yeah,
I just think I don't think we've seen the full potential tapped in there, but I love that you
yeah.
brought up Kennedy Burke. I think that's a good choice. I do just want to get to the Gabby. Listen, we've talked about Gabby. When I heard Seattle and New York were reported as two of the groups that she, or the franchises that she was talking to on the other side of the Olympics, I was like, "Yep, yes, please come to New York, please,
Yep.
please, and thank you. I would love to see that." I think her game is just phenomenal, and she's deceptively strong too. But long, it fits into right what Jonathan Kolb has been talking about. Long, better in the backcourt. Now, Gabby Williams, depending on your roster, is more of a forward than a guard,
Yeah.
but again, gives you that flexibility. That's Gardner, that's Leo, that's Gabby, and that's where any one of those, but realistically, Gabby Williams is probably not in the mix for Seattle. I also saw the comment, don't think we could afford her. Um, you know, but that's where, by having the vacancy in your roster because of Kayla Thornton going to the Valkyries, now you open up space to play with even more versatility. And
Yeah.
that is wild. Like, because that's exactly, again, what got New York a title. And now, arguably, potentially, you have even more of that, more shooters. I think also Gardner's probably a better ball handler, probably Williams as well, than
Mhm.
Kayla Thornton. But Thornton, Brian, is not usually asked to do that. So could she do
Yeah.
it? I'm sure she could. Does she? And will she? No.
Yeah. I have one more wrinkle I think we can throw in.
Yeah.
We have we'll deal with this towards the springtime, but number 7 pick is coming this way. If there's something
Yes.
Jonathan Cole wants to do, if he
I
wants to
think I
pick a
saw a
player
comment
there.
from about that, or up top. I'll try to find it again. Oh, here it goes. Uh, Golden State are going to trade KT to a contender. That's interesting. Do you think the Liberty offered Golden State the 7th pick in exchange for not taking KT? I know Rebecca Gardner was picked up to fill the KT void, but man, and then that's where I didn't see the. I was wondering why there were comments in there. Listen, I think it's a smart. We've kind of already established that. I think it's a smart move. I would imagine that if there were any trades of that caliber, Brian, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I think they would have had to be disclosed by now. If Kayla Thornton was a part of, or taking Kayla Thornton was a part of that in any way, shape, or form, that should, I think, just by decorum, right? The way that things go in sports, that would have had to have been disclosed. I don't think you can really do backdoor deals like that. That doesn't
Yeah.
seem apropos and above the board, so to speak. Now, is Golden State gonna trade Kayla Thornton? Looking at their roster, I really don't know why they would do that.
Yeah.
She's the most recent literally WNBA champion on that roster. I don't think you need to move Kayla Thornton at all.
Yeah, like, she's a good player, like, she'll fit next to whoever you can try to snag in free agency, and I feel like
Mhm.
considering the location, the quality of the organization from the outside looking in, as far as, like, facilities, arena, accessibility, all those kinda things, it seems like it'll be a good landing spot for a potential free agent out there who wants to try something new,
Yep.
so why if you don't have to, especially when we're, what, 5 months away from the season starting, you don't need to
Yeah.
do anything, really.
No.
He's like, "Take your time." Like,
Yeah,
"You got time."
I think they're good. Now, will there be a play in motion for that 7 pick for New York? I mean, I guess it's possible.
Yeah.
I know people have been asking us, Brian, what do we think about? I know Pau Pau has been predicted. I like Pau Pau's game, but I also see a comment about Gabby Williams or Jewel Lloyd. Honestly, even though I would love to see Gabby Williams on a New York roster at some point in time and like closer to the present than not, I don't know that then you have to really start playing around with what other pieces are you moving. As far as
Yeah.
Jewel Lloyd, obviously she has played with Stewie before, so that's an upside there. Was with Sab on the Olympic team, but the problem for me is that now you potentially have Jewel and or Sab playing out of position for more minutes than I think is necessary. I think
Yeah.
the New York Liberty can absolutely find a point guard. I honestly think that what the New York Liberty should do, I've said this before, I'll probably keep saying it until I think a better alternative pops up. I'm very into having a veteran around to help bring on a new point guard. I don't think that the WNBA, or maybe more specifically, I should say, I don't think the NCAA to WNBA pipeline for point guards is strong,
Mm,
like at all. I don't know I don't know how to determine what is missing, but there's a chink in the chain somewhere. And so
mhm.
my fail safe for that, for any team, but we're talking about the Liberty right now, is to, if you have a veteran point guard, keep that veteran point guard until you feel you have their replacement. I don't who's the other point guard on this team right now, Brian? Like, who's playing point?
Yeah,
I don't think it's I think you put yourself in a situation that you don't necessarily have to be in by having Sabrina eat up or be the only person to eat up those PG minutes. I don't
yeah,
think that should be it. And Jewel, I think, creates the same problem. I don't think she
yeah,
helps. She doesn't help get you more PG minutes or lead guard minutes, in my opinion.
yeah. Like we'll sort of delve into Jewel in a bit, but just the
Hmm.
immediate thing is that Jewel Jewel's a max level player, and it's like, hey,
Yeah, also
that
that.
that's a big old chunk of change in your roster you're gonna have to eliminate and move around, and then that means,
Hmm.
ooh, these bench that depth we've been talking about all year, that's gonna change. And oh, we're back in 2023 where it's more top heavy.
Mm,
Do you wanna do that dance again if you don't have to?
yeah.
And you know, I'm gonna I might whisper this because
Oh.
I don't, well, you know what? Screw it. If you yell at me, don't yell at me. Do we think Jules a better guard than Sabrina anyway? I don't think so. So I wouldn't want that. And I think Leo fits the context of the team a lot better. Like, do you
Ooh, he said it.
will
That's a
yeah.
great question. I think it's a great question. Where could Jewel go? I mean, that's another great question. But before we get to that, this is a got to get up a podcast for New York Liberty fans. But our little sibling Tempestagi Talk, where we talk all things Seattle Storm. Is our other podcast here at Black Rosie Media. So we're going to get into the Seattle Storm because, in relation to the topic of today, Kayla Thornton leaving in the expansion draft. Who are her teammates? Well, we ran through that. Who are her new teammates, I should say. But the only thing is, we don't know, Brian, who from Seattle, if at all. I mean, because technically they could make a trade down the line and do something and get someone off of that Seattle roster, but they didn't want nobody who was unprotected. So there are 6 players from the most recent Seattle Storm team, which includes anyone they have rights to, baka baka ba. 6 whole players where Golden State was just like,
Nah, nah,
we good.
nah, nah.
What?
No,
That's
thank you.
wild to me. But also, is it wild? And this kind of goes to me for the question about Jewel Lloyd and specifically the New York Liberty. I want to be clear. I don't know, and I will not speculate on what did and did not happen in Seattle. There was an investigation. That investigation found no wrongdoing or specifically no bullying, no abuse coming from the coaching staff. We don't know if all of the coaches were investigated. We don't know if it was one coach or something in between. We don't know. None of us know. I will say that Jewel Lloyd herself, I was at exit interviews. There's something wasn't clicking to the point where she didn't meet the benchmarks. She said for the first time in her career, she didn't meet the benchmarks. It has been reported. I'm not surprised, but it's only reporting. We don't have any confirmation as far as movement from teams or a statement from Jewel, but it has been reported, and I think it's within the realm of possibility to assume that yes, Jewel wants out of Seattle. I do think that's a very high possibility at this point in time. So now you bring a player coming out of a situation like that. On the one hand, Sandy Brondello is like one of the softest landing places for turmoil. I mean, just go ask Skylar Diggins Smith, right? On the other hand, is Jewel the right kind of player to come into the New York Liberty locker room? And I'm asking the question because I think it's a valid question to ask just with everything else that's going on. For me, Brian, I think that, again, knowing who Sandy is and how she sometimes very disheartening to me, because I like to see a little bit more structure, but she trusts her players. She empowers her players. And if that's something that Jewel wasn't getting in Seattle, I do think it could be something from an off the court perspective, or from like a mental and psychological, like basketball IQ, basketball sports psychology perspective. I do think, New York after Seattle would make sense for Jewel, but just the X's and O's of it don't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, because I feel like it's so weird to have to go from when you're I think you and Roberta talked about it a while back. It's tough to go from number 3 in the depth chart to number 1, and
Mhm.
then you have 2 players who have been number 1 longer in the league than you have been, and it's like, "Oh, I'm still the number 1 option here." And then it's like nothing works the way it's supposed to. So I think having to dial back a bit might help
Mm,
as far as like the on court part, but like the actual, hey, I've been I've been this person since Brianna Stewart left to move east, and now I have to dial back. Why do that if I don't have to? So I
right.
think that's part of a thing that matters when it comes to Jewel. And I think also I was thinking about it in the context of the reporting. First, the initial they were cleared, and then the trade requests. Relationship building is so complicated and so complex. Like
Mhm.
it it takes a long time to build a good relationship, and it takes like seconds to blow one up.
To blow it up.
Yeah,
Yep.
it just takes
That's
like
real.
one ill-timed word, one bad look, and everything is like completely flipped. And I can't quite, from the outside looking in, I can't quite pinpoint when that happened for the Storm this season,
Yep.
but
Yep.
it just feels as if it was never really it was never really there, because even in that first round series, I was like, I know they missed Ezzy for game 1 because she had the concussion, but I was like, "Yo, y'all should not be down like 15 to a vulnerable Vegas team. Like, there's enough
Yeah.
talent here to make it shake."
Yeah.
And I think what happened, just like from watching Seattle, it felt like they needed more time. And, we spent all of last year talking about the Liberty putting things together. And I was thinking about that specifically in the context of Benisha and Lady Hamilton. And I
Mhm.
bring up B in this point because there was at the beginning of last year, she was a little bit frustrated. I remember we asked her in pregame one day, how are you getting comfortable making our 3 pointers? I'm just standing in the corner. And then it's like, oh, okay. Like she wasn't like she didn't give like a tone about it, but it's like, okay, I can do more than sit in the corner. And then gradually we saw her being more included. And then during the Connecticut series, I saw the audio of it. She was like, yeah, I talked with Sandy. I was like, okay, this is not, I'm not liking how I'm used right now. Can we sort of figure something out? And Sandy's like,
Yep.
okay, I got you.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you saw B tap back into that all defensive
Exactly.
as a player.
Yep.
And I think for Noe, I would love to sort of like if we can get her in like a room with the cameras off for an hour, I'd be like, hey, tell me, like, walk me through how you sort of wanted to put the how you wanted to manage the personalities on this team and how to make sure everyone got in their best position. Because I think, in 2023, it was just Jewel and Ezzy on the roster, and then it's Jewel, go cook, get in the elbow, make something happen. Now
Yep.
it's I have all WNBA big coming in NECA.
Come
I
on.
have a point guard who demands excellence of herself, so you slacking is not going to cut it.
Not gonna cut
Skylar
it.
Diggins
No,
Smith,
and she'll let you know.
yeah, she will tell you because,
We
like,
and won't mince any kind of words about it.
yeah, like one thing about Skylar Diggins Smith is that she demands a lot from herself.
Yes.
So it's if I'm pushing myself as hard as I can,
I know
why aren't
y'all
you?
better.
Yeah, you better.
Exactly.
And
Come
like
on.
and then that post game, like I remember you and
Woo.
Roberta spent a good amount of time on it when it happened. And she was like, "Yo, we made these mistakes. We lost this effing game, and we cannot do that." And it's, hey, she's exactly right. And if it's if the new person in the job can see what's going on wrong around here and the person who's been here the longest, it's like, okay, can you, the person who has a seniority in this specific environment, what are you going to do about it? Can you meet what I'm doing? Because if not, we're going to have a problem.
Yep.
And
Come
it
on, level
appears we
up.
had a, yeah, like it's like, hey, I'm doing what I'm doing, and I was gone for a year. I was gone for a year. I had
Right.
I had Coach Black History Month. You had Noe for all this time.
No.
What's your problem?
I'm so weak.
Like,
Oh, geez. Wow. Hilarious. Okay. I want to get to some comments. We will be talking more about the Seattle Storm and everything happening there, what we know, what we don't know, what we think will happen, and what probably won't happen, all of that stuff on Tempestagi Talk. So stay tuned. We have to set a date and a time, but we should have a new episode coming soon. I want to go back to this. Kayla has 1 year left on her contract, 2026. Almost everyone will be a free agent. Golden State is not winning with KT. Okay, we kind of talked about this at the top of the episode. It's not impossible, but extremely improbable for an expansion team in any league to win a championship in their first season. So there's that. That's number one. As far as draft capital, we also talked about this. the Now there's a little bit of this of Golden State is not going to say, well, we have a 5-year plan to even get to the playoffs, because they're not attracting nobody talking that talk.
yeah,
Like, right? They're not going to say that, even if that's what is really on their mind. That's not what they're going to say. Of course, they're going to say they want to be competitive because they want to get the best out of the players that nobody else wanted, apparently. And again, I'm being dramatic. The teams in the WNBA, 12 teams in the WNBA, were forced to make a list of 6 players. They did that. Whatever their decision making, we may never know, because it's a secret. It's a secret list. So talk about making lemonade out of lemons, or whatever you want to say. There are some limitations on all parties, and that's exactly why expansion drafts are set up the way they are, because you don't want teams giving away or only making accessible players that, for one reason or another, injury, near retirement, um, any of the other things that we talked about explicitly or overtly and covertly. There could be a number of reasons, why a player is not necessarily going to march you to your first year goals, let alone your 5-year goals. But draft capital in the WNBA is wild to me, because I don't really think that an expansion team has the luxury, Brian, of trying to stock up. They need to fill their 12-player roster, and
yeah,
they already said no thank you to Seattle. So they already are on an 11-player roster. Like, they are already on, we're not bringing in anyone, so just in case we need to sign someone at the Supermax. Like, they're already doing that. They're
yeah,
already, so they don't have, like, draft capital is a thing that I get to talk about in the NHL. You can maybe kind of talk about that in the NBA, because there's G League, there's all these places that you can have someone's rights to play in the league while they're playing somewhere else. That doesn't exist, especially for domestic born players. Now, that's not to say that players in the United States or even Canada don't play in some of these other leagues. We've seen Diamond to Shields do a little bit of that, but it's not common. It's not commonplace. So draft capital for what? Like, for what? Because everyone
yeah,
else is trying to stock up too. Like, in the W, it doesn't work that way.
yeah,
It appears to me. Like, you take a massive risk by trying to stockpile picks for later, because later doesn't always come. Ask Dallas. I mean, let's keep it real. Ask Dallas. Ask Indiana. Hello?
yeah.
There's some New York Liberty teams that have had, we actually traded away, a number one pick. That's why Sab became our first ever number one draft pick, because we traded away a number one pick and still didn't get a dang title. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, Erica, there's something else I was thinking. I'd love to hear what you think of it as.
We're closing down like 5 minutes.
I thought we had 2
Oh,
hours.
Yes, it's 45 is when the
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
They kicking me out, y'all. All right, get your thought in.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, it helps to have a player who can establish a foundation of what you want to do and how you want to operate as a team. So having a player like Kayla matters in that regard too.
Yeah.
Like, you want to have someone who is okay, she knows how to play the right way. She's won before. Hell, she won in Dallas, and winning in Dallas is not easy. So
Not
you want to
easy.
have someone who can sort of grind it out in that regard. So that matters too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think there's so many things here to take into play. Obviously, we were basically wrapping up anyway. We're not going to get to all of the questions. I do think this is an interesting one. I don't honestly know what the role is for Davis, and I don't think that that means that there isn't one. It just means that it's not really clear, because Sandy didn't feel that she had that luxury to go to Q. So could she be that? Sure, she could, but we just don't know what that looks like at the WNBA level anyway. But she has a lot of attributes, I think, that would make her successful at that position. We just really don't know.
Yeah. Time will tell. Time will tell on that front.
Yeah. Which point guard is going to be available right now? I don't know. Also,
Yeah.
I honestly don't know that. I've said this before. There's not a lot of teams where I think they have a true point guard. So that's the problem that I'm saying, Damien. Like there's not an overload of players at that position that I think would even fit in the New York Liberty, whether they have WNBA experience or not. So I think you have to come through the draft, which means that if you're gonna give a rookie the keys, you better know dang well that they're ready for it. But anyway, folks, we're gonna have to wrap this up. I don't know what happens if I go over the 5-minute mark, so I'm not trying to find out. But Brian, thank you so much for joining me here. Oh man, this is an interesting question. We're definitely going to get into this one at some point. Again, expansion draft.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody filling seats.
Yeah.
They picked Kate Barton as the poster child. That's a really interesting pick. But by nature, that's not what Golden State is going to do. They still get a draft pick. They still get free agency. This is just the expansion draft. We don't know how these players are gonna fit. But we will have to wrap here. Brian, thank you as always for joining me on another episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Stay tuned because we will have another episode, Tempestagi Talk, coming up this week.
And before we forget, newsletter, people.
That's it.
Subscribe. Do that thing.
That's it. Women's basketball roundup comes directly to your inbox on Mondays. If you are subscribed, subscription is absolutely free. Yes, but check out the newsletter. We'll have more on the expansion draft. We'll have a recap of this. And I was at the Barclays event. We had Iowa, Louisville, UConn, and Tennessee. And oh, baby, I definitely learned a lot about those 4 teams, including the one that's unranked, that probably will be by the time our next newsletter comes out. All right. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one.